It was supposed to be a joke. Just a stupid offhand remark at a neighborhood barbecue. The kind that's forgotten before the paper plates hit the trash. But this one didn't fade. It stuck like smoke in the fabric of my mind. Paul, loud, beer in hand, already teetering between funny and annoying, looked at my son chasing after the other kids and said, "Man, he doesn't look a thing like you, huh?" Then he laughed, smacked my back, and moved on to the ribs. Everyone else did too. Except me. I laughed with them, of course. What else could I do? But something inside me recoiled. That laugh didn't come from anywhere real. It felt off. Hollow. I brushed it off at first. I had to. I loved my wife. I loved our son. He was 6. A sweet kid, smart, curious, always asking questions. He had this wild mop of dark hair and these big brown eyes, and for years I thought those eyes were magic. Now I wasn't so sure where they came from. It's amazing how quickly a seed of doubt can sprout. You water it with glances, with memories, with the tiniest inconsistencies that never mattered before. Now they felt like clues in a puzzle I hadn't realized I was supposed to solve. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I started watching him differently. Not with love exactly. Not at first. It was something else closer to scrutiny. I hated myself for it. But it was there all the same. The way he pronounced certain words. His laugh. His gait. I thought about how he never really looked like me. How people always said he's got your wife's eyes, but never anything about me. I told myself I was being ridiculous. That I was letting one idiot's comment twist something beautiful. But I couldn't let it go. I started pulling up photos, side-by-sides of me as a kid and him now. I searched his face like it was a map that could lead me back to peace of mind. And then I did it. I didn't tell my wife. I didn't ask her. I ordered the kit late one night like I was buying something shameful. It arrived in a box that looked too cheerful for what it was. I waited until she was out shopping and swabbed our son's mouth as he watched cartoons, unaware that something sacred was being measured. I mailed it the same day. 2 weeks later, an email arrived. The message was short, clinical, final, 0% probability of paternity. I stared at the words, waiting for them to change. They didn't. I didn't feel heartbreak at first. I felt numb. Like I was standing outside my own body, watching someone else's world implode. This wasn't suspicion anymore. It was fact. Cold, statistical fact. And just like that, everything I thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, my family, my role in this house, was gone. She lied to me. Not just once. Not in a way you could explain away with late-night arguments or apologies whispered in the dark. This was a lie woven into our very foundation. And now every smile, every "I love you," every bedtime story felt counterfeit. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal. It was that I still loved that boy. And I didn't know what that meant anymore. She passed me the mashed potatoes like it was any other Tuesday. The same bright smile, the same gentle nudge of her foot under the table when our son made a mess, the same casual chatter about the Henderson's pool renovation and a travel deal she found for spring break. To anyone watching, we were the perfect family, easy laughter, clinking cutlery, warmth bleeding into the corners of the room. But I wasn't really there. I was watching her from behind a wall. The same wall that went up the moment I read the word excluded on that report. I nodded along to her stories. I chewed my food. I even smiled once or twice. But inside, something had unraveled. I couldn't stop seeing her through the lens of what I now knew, or worse, what I didn't know. Every gesture, every word, every blink of her lashes felt rehearsed. How many times had she smiled like that while lying to me? The betrayal wasn't loud. It didn't scream. It whispered. It whispered in the way she touched her phone a little too quickly when it buzzed. In the way she tilted the screen just slightly away. In the way she excused herself to the bathroom mid-movie and came back 10 minutes later, eyes too bright, like she'd just been reminded of something better. I didn't ask. Not yet. I wasn't ready to hear her version. I needed to see more. I started watching her, really watching her. When she folded laundry, I noticed things I never had. New underwear. Lacy, delicate, expensive. Nothing I'd bought her. Nothing she ever wore for me. She used to laugh at lingerie ads. Who wears that stuff in real life, she once said. Apparently she does now. I began cataloging it all. Not just the physical things, the receipts left carelessly in the trash, the unknown numbers that called at odd hours, the scent of cologne that didn't belong in our home, but the changes in her. The tiny fissures in her story. She started going to bed later than usual. She'd say she couldn't sleep, that she was watching videos, but when I passed the door, I could hear her voice. Soft. Laughing. Whispering. Always in the bathroom. Always with the door locked. She didn't even flinch anymore when I walked past. Like she'd grown confident that I wasn't paying attention. But I was. Every second of every day. Our son would tug at my sleeve, asking when we'd go to the zoo again, and I'd smile and say soon. But my mind was elsewhere. Stuck on the sound of her voice muffled behind the bathroom door. Trying to decode the rhythm of a relationship I was never part of. Some nights, I sat in the car long after I got home. Just staring at the garage light, wondering who she really was when I wasn't around. What else I'd missed. What parts of our life had been built on nothing but performance. And the worst part? She still kissed me goodnight. Same gentle lips. Same familiar touch. But now I knew better. Now I knew it wasn't love. It was routine. Or worse, a cover. Because her smile was a lie. And I was done being the only one not in on the truth. It was always just a wave. A nod, sometimes a grin, and once in a while, a neighborly thumbs up when he caught me hauling trash cans down the driveway. Chris, husband, father, runner, part-time lawn care enthusiast. The kind of man people described as solid. The kind of man I never thought twice about. Until I started looking. At first, it was coincidence. Harmless overlap. She'd leave for an errand and 5 minutes later I'd see him jog past the house, same route, same time. Nothing strange there. Just the rhythm of suburbia where patterns are so predictable they almost fade into the background. But when your world is cracked, even the smallest tremor makes you jump. It began to bother me. The precision of it. She'd grab her keys, say she needed almond milk or stamps, and he'd suddenly appear, like clockwork, tightening the strap of his fitness tracker as he stretched on the curb. I wouldn't have thought much of it except for the way she smiled on her way out. Light, unburdened. Like she was headed towards something, not away from it. So I started paying attention. And that's when I saw it, the eye contact. Across driveways, across hedges. Subtle, brief, but unmistakably real. A second too long, a flicker too soft. He'd glance over while mowing, shirtless in the summer sun, and she just happened to step outside at the same time, pretending to water a plant she hadn't touched in weeks. There's an intimacy in silence. In glances. A language that only exists when you're hiding something. I checked her location history. I don't even remember doing it, honestly. Just remember the cold in my hands when I saw the list of addresses, the familiar street name repeated again and again. His house. Sometimes during the day, sometimes in the early evenings when she claimed to be at the grocery store, grabbing one more thing. And always she'd come back humming. Or in the kind of mood that made her kinder than usual, like guilt had softened her edges for a while. He waved to me that same week. I was trimming the hedge when he crossed the street, holding a beer and asking about the big game. He smiled the whole time like we were just two regular guys talking about football, and not like he was the reason I couldn't sleep. Not like his house was the one my wife vanished into while I thought she was picking out yogurt. I responded because that's what people do. I smiled back. But inside, something burned. There's something uniquely cruel about betrayal from within arm's reach. A stranger is one thing. But a man who lives 40 feet from your front door? A man whose kids play with yours in the summer? Who's eating at your table? That's a different kind of wound. I started watching their routines the way I used to watch our son's baby monitor, obsessively, helplessly, knowing I couldn't change what I saw. I noticed how she never parked too close to his driveway, how he waited until dusk to take out the trash, how their conversations never happened when anyone else was looking. They weren't careless. But they weren't careful enough. And now every smile from across the street, every neighborly wave felt like mockery. Like he was daring me to confront what I already knew. The truth wasn't hiding anymore. It lived just across the street. And it was waving at me. I didn't plan what I was going to say. There was no cinematic buildup, no dramatic storm outside the window, just a quiet evening and the weight of something that could no longer be contained. She was folding laundry on the couch, her soft hum filling the space between us like nothing had changed. But everything had. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her. Her fingers moved quickly, neatly, like always. A rhythm I used to find comforting. Now it felt mechanical. Performed. I told her I needed to talk. Just that. For words. She glanced up, smiled. That same smile. It didn't reach her eyes. I said his name. The smile vanished. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just said his name and waited. Her expression faltered, mouth opening just slightly before closing again, like the words got stuck somewhere between denial and confession. What about him? She asked. Too casual. Too quick. I didn't answer. I let silence speak for me. I wanted to see how far she'd go. She laughed once, forced, brittle, and shook her head. You're being paranoid, she said. He's just our neighbor. Why would you even? I said the name of the hotel. The dates. The receipts I found in her email. I told her about the location history. The photos. Her face crumbled like wet paper. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't fall to the floor or burst into tears immediately. She just stopped moving. Then came the first crack. It was a mistake. Her voice was barely above a whisper. She said it again. It was just one night. I didn't mean for it to happen. One night. The second lie. I stared at her, not responding, and in that silence, I think she realized I knew. That there was no hiding behind the moment of weakness story. I had dismantled the timeline. I had seen the texts, the pet names, the jokes that only make sense between people who've made each other feel things they shouldn't. One night? No. It wasn't one night. It was dinners. Late checkouts. Morning after messages where she called him hours. And yet she clung to the lie like it might save her. She started crying. Not the angry, cornered kind. Not yet. This was the pleading kind, full of apologies and promises and words that once held meaning but now felt like static. I love you, she said. I made a mistake. I never wanted to hurt you. The oldest lines in the book. And maybe at some point in my life they would have meant something. But not anymore. Not after what I'd seen. Not while that man, still lived across the street, washing his car, waving at our son, smiling like he hadn't torn through my life with his hands. What hit hardest wasn't the affair. It was the geography of it. The proximity. The banality of it. They had taken what was sacred and made it small, something that happened during school drop-offs, during jogs, during midweek grocery runs. She begged me to look at her. Said she was sorry. Said she still wanted us. But I felt nothing. Just the awareness of how close his house was. How easily she could walk from ours to his. How long it had been happening under the very sky we both slept beneath. I didn't scream. I didn't even cry. I just sat down and let the silence tell her everything she needed to know. The first lie was the paternity. The second was this. And I knew with a cold certainty there were more. I stared at the message for 15 minutes before pressing send. It wasn't explicit. Just a few lines. Polite, cautious, vague enough to be ignored if she wanted it to be. I didn't even know if it was the right move. I didn't know what I was hoping for, confirmation, denial, maybe someone to share the weight of this with. I sent it and closed my phone. An hour later, it buzzed. She responded. Short and direct, come by. He's not home. Coffee? I read it over 3 times before moving. My hands didn't feel like they belonged to me as I walked across the street, past the hedges, past the life that used to seem so perfectly intact. A wreath still hung on their door from the holidays. I knocked once and she opened before the echo faded. She didn't say anything. Just nodded and stepped aside. The house was quiet. Not spotless, but lived in. Kids' shoes by the door, a throw blanket balled up on the couch, a forgotten juice box on the counter. It smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly sweet. Familiar, somehow. The kind of normal that had once existed on my side of the street. We sat at the kitchen island. She poured coffee into 2 mismatched mugs, and for a long time we just sat. No need for introductions. She knew why I was there. And I knew she knew. I caught them in July, she said. No build-up. No softening. Thought it was a phase. Thought he'd come to his senses. Her voice was steady, but her fingers were curled tightly around the mug. I didn't interrupt. I didn't even blink. Just listened. She told me everything. The changes she noticed, the excuses, the late-night gym sessions that never made sense. She found a receipt once, same hotel I'd seen. Saw a message flash across his phone screen. Once she came home early from a weekend with her sister and found my wife's coat on their staircase. I should have left, she said. Any sane person would have. But she didn't. She stayed. For the kids, she added. For stability. For the kind of life we'd built on paper. I nodded like I understood. I didn't. Not really. I'd imagined this woman differently. Colder, maybe? Someone who didn't know or didn't care. But she wasn't either of those things. She was tired. Not physically, not visibly, but somewhere deeper. A kind of exhaustion I recognized in the way her eyes rarely stayed still. She'd been living in the truth longer than I had. And she was still here. Does he know you know? I asked. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, he knows. He just thinks I've made peace with it. And maybe she had in her own way. Or maybe she hadn't, and this was the only form of survival that made sense. There was no rage in her voice. No spite. Just quiet resignation. And that, more than anything, haunted me. You must hate her, I said. She shook her head. I did. For a while. But hating her doesn't change anything. And honestly, it's not just her. She didn't say more. She didn't have to. We sat in that silence, both of us orbiting the same wreckage, both pretending not to notice how familiar the other's pain felt. Her coffee had gone cold and mine tasted like nothing. "You going to leave?" she asked finally. I didn't know how to answer. I still don't. But I saw something in her eyes, not pity, not judgment. Recognition. The kind of loneliness that sits with you like an old friend even when someone else is in the room. When I stood to leave, she didn't walk me out. Just nodded once and went back to wiping the counter. Like we were strangers again. But we weren't. Not anymore. It started with small things. A shared glance when our spouses crossed paths in the driveway. A casual wave when we were both out front, pretending to care about hedges and sidewalks. And then one afternoon I saw her sitting on the porch, staring into nothing, a coffee mug cradled like it might keep her anchored. I crossed the street without thinking. She didn't ask why I came over. I didn't ask if it was okay. We just sat. At first, all we talked about was them. The lies, the patterns, the things that no one else could understand unless they'd lived it too. She told me how he had changed, not all at once, but in increments. How his smile had started to feel like a sales pitch. How she used to watch him sleep and wonder where the man she married had gone. I told her about the paternity test. About the moment everything in me fractured. She didn't flinch. She didn't gasp or apologize. She just nodded like the world had made her fluent in disappointment too. Our conversations became routine. A few minutes stolen on a Tuesday afternoon. An hour on Saturday when the kids were with friends. Sometimes we didn't even speak. We just sat in silence, two people occupying the same kind of emptiness. But the silence changed. It softened. She started laughing at things I said, not out of politeness, but genuine, sudden laughter that made me forget what had brought me here. I found myself waiting for it. Watching for the way her face changed when she let herself forget, even for a second, the weight she carried. She told me once that I was easy to talk to. Said it with a tilt of her head like it surprised her. I told her it was probably because I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was just there. And then, slowly, something shifted. She touched my arm one day. Just lightly, a reflex when something startled her. But it lingered. I felt it more than I should have. She started noticing things when I hadn't slept, when I was lying about being fine. No one had done that in a long time. Not really. Not without some agenda attached. There was a moment, I remember it exactly, when we were sitting in her kitchen, the late light catching dust in the air, and she reached across the table and brushed a crumb off my shirt. Nothing dramatic. Just a small gesture. But it lingered in the air, heavier than it should have. We didn't plan it. We didn't speak about it. But it happened. A shared silence, broken only by breath. For a second, the world paused, no betrayals, no lies, no spouses, no children, just us. Two people who had been stripped down to nothing by the people they trusted most, now finding something dangerously close to comfort in the one person they weren't supposed to. Afterward, I couldn't meet my own eyes in the mirror. Because I knew what I'd become. What I joined. It didn't matter that it wasn't planned. That it didn't start with desire. It mattered that I crossed a line I once used to measure the people who hurt me. And now the line was behind me. Blurred. Like everything else. I used to think betrayal had a shape. Sharp edges. A clean line between victim and villain. But now I'm not so sure. It started with the parking. 2 blocks away, under a flickering streetlight, windows rolled down so the car wouldn't hold heat. I told myself it was smart. Careful. That it was temporary. But the first lie you tell is always to yourself. Then came the excuses. Late work meetings. Grocery runs that took too long. I started silencing my phone, setting alarms just in case I lost track of time. I deleted texts, cleared call logs. I got good at it, too good, the kind of practiced dishonesty that feels normal after a while. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was becoming him. The man I used to glare at from across the street. The man who smiled at my son while stealing moments with my wife. Now here I was, whispering to someone else's wife, watching the clock tick like it was counting down the end of who I used to be. I hated it. I hated the thrill, the dependency, the way my heartbeat changed when I saw her name flash on the screen. I hated knowing I was slipping, willingly, into the same shadows that had once swallowed me whole. And yet I kept going back. Because it was the only time I felt anything anymore. She laughed at things no one else noticed. She knew when to leave the silence alone. She understood how betrayal carves out parts of you you didn't know could go missing. We told ourselves it wasn't revenge. That we weren't doing this to hurt them, that this was ours. A separate thing. Not a reaction, but a release. A quiet rebellion in a world that had already rewritten the rules without our consent. But sometimes when her hand brushed mine and our eyes locked a second too long, I saw something flicker, not softness, but fire. Not comfort, but hunger. For justice, maybe? For power. For the feeling of being the one who knew the secret instead of the one being kept in the dark. There were moments after I left her house when I'd catch my reflection in the car window. The same face, but older. Harder. Like it had absorbed too many nights, too many silences. I used to recognize the man in the mirror. Now, I wasn't sure who he was. I told myself it was survival. That I'd earned this moment of clarity, of connection. But that's just another lie layered on top of all the others. Because deep down, I knew what was happening. I was looking into the eyes of the man who broke me. And I was seeing myself. It was past midnight when she woke me. Or pretended to. I wasn't sleeping. I hadn't slept well in weeks. I was staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between her footsteps as she paced the hallway. Something was wrong. I knew that rhythm by now. It wasn't guilt. It was grief. When she entered the bedroom, she was already crying. Not the restrained kind. Not the polished sorrow of someone easing into a confession. This was raw, hiccuping sobs. Makeup smudged. Shirt wrinkled. The mask she'd worn for months had finally cracked. I sat up, not because I wanted to comfort her, but because I needed to know where this was going. He ended it, she said, barely coherent. He ended it, and I don't understand why. She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. She collapsed onto the bed, burying her face in her hands, body shaking like she'd lost something precious, not realizing she'd lost it a long time ago. Not realizing I was already gone. It took her a full minute before she looked up. I need to tell you something, she said. I said nothing. And then it came. A flood of truth, twisted, incomplete, desperate. She told me about the affair, about the months of secrecy, the nights she claimed were work functions, the hotel in Fairfield. She said she never meant to fall for him. That it was supposed to be an escape, something temporary. But she got used to the way he made her feel, the attention, the spark. Now he was gone. His wife had found out. He'd folded, fast and clean, ended it to protect his image, his family. Left her stranded in the mess. He said it was a mistake, she cried. That it meant nothing. But it did mean something. It meant everything. She looked at me, eyes rimmed with salt, searching for sympathy in a face I no longer knew how to wear. I didn't speak. Not because I was shocked, but because I had run out of versions of myself that knew how to comfort her. She didn't know I'd seen the receipts. That I'd read the messages. That I'd spent sleepless nights building a quiet case against her while she texted him goodnight. She also didn't know that while she was clinging to a love affair unraveling across the street, I was sitting at another kitchen table, drinking coffee with his wife, undoing the knot of pain in someone else's hands. I watched her cry like she was the victim. Like she had been blindsided. She kept saying she didn't want to lose me. That she wanted to fix things. That we could go to therapy. That she still loved me. And I nodded, slow, measured, because I had become the thing she didn't know how to see. The other half of her betrayal's reflection. She was mourning a man who discarded her. I was mourning the man I used to be. Neither of us could take it back. But only one of us knew just how far we'd both already gone. The for sale sign went up on a Wednesday morning. It arrived quietly, without ceremony, just a man in a windbreaker driving metal into the lawn of the house across the street. No one gathered. No one asked questions. But by that point, they didn't have to. Everyone already knew. Whispers had begun weeks earlier, lawn talk, hushed phone calls, paused conversations when someone else stepped too close. Our neighborhood, once perfectly manicured and predictably boring, had turned into a slow burn scandal, unfolding hedge by hedge. I watched his wife pack the car in silence. She moved like someone who'd been planning the exit for months, every box sealed, every item methodically accounted for. The kids climbed in without fuss. No goodbyes, no backward glances. The house sat hollow by that evening. Lights off. Curtains drawn. I stood at our window, coffee going cold in my hand, and tried to feel something. Regret. Relief. Closure. But all I felt was that strange, familiar numbness. Like the entire street had been drained of color. And then came the moment I hadn't prepared for. She, my wife, was already in the kitchen when I walked in. Pale. Quiet. Holding her phone like it had said something unforgivable. You, she asked, barely audible. You were with her? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The pieces had finally arranged themselves. The late nights. The silences. The calm with which I'd absorbed her betrayal. It didn't add up until now. You did the same thing, she whispered. I met her eyes, and something shifted. Recognition, maybe. Or the absence of it. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Like the man she'd built her life with had been replaced with someone colder, sharper. Someone she couldn't manipulate or read. And maybe that was true. Because somewhere along the way I had changed. Not suddenly. Not with a single decision. But in quiet, irreversible inches. I didn't love her, I said. Flat. Honest. She flinched but didn't argue. I think part of her had been waiting for that, some validation that she wasn't the only one who'd burned everything down. Divorce became a formality after that. The motions were familiar, lawyers, paperwork, negotiations that barely hid the bitterness beneath. But the strange part was how little we fought. There was nothing left to defend. No version of us either of us believed in anymore. The neighborhood watched it happen from both sides of the street. Two houses, once filled with barbecues and holiday lights and birthday parties, now sitting in quiet disrepair. One with a for sale sign. One with boxes in the garage. Mirrors of each other. One betrayed. One betraying. And somewhere in between, two people who once waved at each other every morning, now watching their lives collapse in near-perfect symmetry. The lights across the street stayed off for days. So did ours. The street is quiet now. The kind of quiet that feels deliberate, as if the neighborhood itself is holding its breath, hoping time might smooth over what happened here. But some stains don't fade. Some silences feel too heavy to ever lift. It's been months since the final papers were signed. My wife is gone. Her half of the closet empty, the scent of her shampoo long vanished from the pillows. She left in pieces, some packed in boxes, others in words I stopped listening to. No final blowout, no dramatic last stand. Just the slow, inevitable unraveling of something that used to mean everything. Across the street, the house is still for sale. The sign sways gently in the wind like it's waving goodbye to no one in particular. I've watched 3 families come by with realtors, peering through windows, measuring walls, imagining a future in a place built on quiet disaster. None of them made an offer. Not yet. His wife is gone too. Moved out of state, last I heard. Somewhere quieter, near family. We haven't spoken since that night, the night when we said nothing but everything. A last glance across the porch, no promises, no explanations. Just distance. We knew better than to ask what it all meant. We had nothing left to offer each other that wouldn't rot in daylight. Now I sit by the window most nights, not out of habit but out of something harder to name. A compulsion, maybe? A final tether to a version of myself I no longer recognize. I watch the bare windows of the house that started it all and wonder who I've become. I used to think betrayal was a wound, something that healed, scabbed over, left a scar. Now I wonder if it's more like a mirror. One that cracks with each choice, each silence, each justification. And eventually, you don't recognize the reflection staring back. People ask if I'm okay. They say it like it's an obligation. I nod. Smile. Tell them I'm fine. But sometimes I catch myself watching the porch light across the street flicker, and I remember all the moments I never saw. All the ones I chose not to see. Am I better? Or just different? I don't know anymore. What I do know is that nothing about this street will ever feel like home again. Not the laughter echoing from new neighbors. Not the scent of barbecue smoke in summer. Not even the wind brushing through the trees the same way it always has. This place, these houses, they were witnesses to everything. And no fresh coat of paint will ever change that.